when asked a question regarding anything within the sports environment, my first answer generally is it depends. There are very few absolutes that I have because I think there's so many different factors and variables involved in almost any question. And so, too often, I believe that people inside and outside of sports want absolute answers. We want a black and white response to a question. So, I get questions about shooting, strength and conditioning, talent development, skill development, a lot of different areas. And each of these areas to me is, individual and situation specific. Again, if somebody asked me a question about, well, is this the right shooting system for my team to use? I don't know. Who's on your team? Where are they now? How long have they been training? How many, are they good shooters? Are they bad shooters? Do they need to change their technique? Is it a strength problem? Is it a size problem? Are they, is it a young team and the problem really is that they're using a ball that's too big for their hands and shooting at a basket that's too high for them? There's a lot of different factors involved with whether or not, some singular shooting method is appropriate for a group of, 12 players. And so that's how I would phrase a response, is I would ask a lot of questions. And I find a lot of coaches receive my questions and are like, well, thank you. And then they move on and they find somebody else who has an absolute answer. Even if that absolute answer is only 50 or 60% effective, they'd rather have an absolute response and somebody to tell them exactly what to do, even if it's erroneous, as opposed to somebody trying to get more information or trying to get them to solve their own problem within their own situation based on what they know about those players that are in front of them and their situation and each of the individual constraints or within the team and within the players. If somebody asked me, well, my son is 15 years old, he's a pretty good shooter, I think he needs to change his technique, should he change his technique? I don't know, depends. How hard is he willing to work? What does pretty good shooter mean? What are his goals? Those are the three, first three questions that I want to know before I even begin to give a response. Because if the player is not going to work hard enough to make that change, then I would say no. If pretty good is shooting 40% from the three-point line, but dad wants him to be 45% from the three-point line, probably not going to change anything. So it depends on a lot of things, a lot of factors, a lot of variables. And so to give an absolute answer to a question, to me, just invites being incorrect. And so I would rather take time and I would rather admit that I don't know an absolute. There's no absolute with me. I'm not saying that you have to always do X, Y, or Z. I'm going to say, there are general things that I teach. There are generally things that I believe. But for the most part, they're situation or individual specific. And I might change based on who that individual is. So I was having a conversation with a friend about squatting with basketball players. And I definitely do squat with basketball players, but not all basketball players. I worked with a guy who's in the NBA now when he was in college. An incredible elastic athlete. We didn't squat. And I had been communicating with an NBA strength coach at the time, and the strength coach couldn't believe that I wasn't squatting, that maybe if we did do heavy squats, we could add an inch or two to his vertical. And this was a player who already had a 36, 38 inch vertical jump and was a 6'2" guard dunking on 6'10" posts. To me, adding an inch or two to his vertical jump would have almost no influence on whether or not he could make the NBA or whether or not he was going to be a high D1 player or whether or not he was going to excel. It was, to me, those extra 1 or 2 inches when he could already clearly jump in the top, even probably 1 to 2% of NBA players. There's no point, to me, in putting him under a heavy squat, which he hadn't had a lot of experience doing, didn't want to do. So there's a potential for, an injury risk, starting to do some squats. But also I was worried about, he's a really elastic athlete, why heavy squat him and potentially damage that elasticity just in the hopes that we could add, 1 or 2 inches to his squat. So it wasn't something that I wanted to experiment with and see how it would work. It was an instance where with him, fine, you're already a really robust athlete, really super athletic, really elastic athlete. Let's try to keep you as a really elastic, really resilient athlete and not worry about squatting. But your teammate, who isn't and is a very strength-based athlete, well, yeah, we're going to go hard and we're going to go heavy with you because you guys are two different athletes, different size, different strength, different positions, different needs, different starting point. And so to give an absolute answer, if the head coach in that case had come and asked me beforehand, well, do you squat heavy with players? Well, it depends. With the first athlete, no. With the second athlete, yes. And I didn't have an absolute answer that yes, I squat heavy all the time, all players, it doesn't matter who it is, because I don't believe in absolutes. I know a player who went to college unable to squat because of a previous hip injury, but their coach had an absolute that everybody had to be tested in a max squat on the first day, of strength and conditioning. And this player hadn't squatted in at least 3 years because of the injury, still wasn't 100% healthy, still couldn't do a proper body weight squat. And here he was seeing how much he could lift because he was trying to please the coach. And he was a freshman trying to do his best. And then his hip injury that was almost healed now became a back injury and he missed 3 months because that coach had an absolute. Everybody has to do this. So to me, when you set yourself up and you have these absolutes, you set yourself up for these problems of potential injury, backing yourself into a corner, things like this. To me, it depends. That instance, there's no way that player should have been squatting, probably ever, but certainly not a max squat test, on the first day of strength and conditioning when he got to college. So again, regardless of what question you ask me, my first answer is probably going to be it depends. I need more information. I need to get down to, what's this specific situation? Who is this specific player? And then how can we best create, a plan or a program or a system around what they do well, what they need to improve, whether it's a team environment or an individual environment. And to me, that's the best way to go about development because skill development, talent development, is N equals 1. It's every individual is different and every individual has different needs, has different strengths and weaknesses, and has different needs for their future development to get to whatever goal it is because their goals are also individual. So what they want to achieve is going to be different and it's also going to help to determine, how hard to push a player, what to give that player. So again, if you're going to email me a question, expect me to ask questions in reply because I need more information because I don't give absolutes. And unfortunately, that often doesn't go over well with management and other coaches because they want absolutes and they're less concerned with that absolute being, close to 100% correct as opposed to simply having, a set of directions to follow. But for me, it depends.